Hello there again, friends. Today is 2/21/2022, and today is the Odin Project Vlog Day 64. Been a while since I put up a video. Um, Not really by design, but I was working on the calculator project, and long story short, I started on number 4 there, create the functions that populate, blah blah blah, and I got that done, and I was in a flow state, and it was over the last weekend, like Saturday I think. I got into a flow state, and as you guys are probably aware, when you get in a flow state, you just kind of keep going because you don't want to stop. Because once you exit out of the flow state and you take a break or you come back, it's hard to get back into flow, especially with a complicated project like this with a lot of moving parts. So, long story short, by the time I got out of flow and I went back to think about making a video segment, like a part series, it didn't make sense. I wasn't at a point where it made sense to make a video, because I always want to give you guys great content, and what I had wasn't ready. Um, it wasn't ready for prime time. It wasn't ready for discussion. Stuff was still broke. I don't like to put out videos like that because I don't feel like if I was watching it would be super helpful to see a product that's not to a good stopping point. So basically, I took this thing all the way home. So I did number 4, create the functions that populate the display when you click the number buttons. You should be storing the display value in a variable somewhere for use in the next step. And then you make the calculator work. You'll need to find a way to store the first number that's input into the calculator when a user presses an operator, and also which saves an operator has been chosen, then operate on them when the user presses the equal key. You should already have the code that can populate the display. So once operate has been called, update the display with the solution to the operation. And it says that this is the hardest part of the project. You need to figure out how to store all the values and call the operate function with them. Don't feel bad if it takes you a while to figure out the logic. And that is so true. And that's I got stuck several different spots with values like that. But we'll go over that. Gotchas. Watch out for these and fix them as they come up. Number 1 basically says if you enter in a what I call a string of arguments, you should still process them 2 at a time, and that should equal 42 for an example. So where I went wrong, and I had to backpedal yesterday actually on Sunday, is I got almost all the way done with evaluating the first 2 sets that I forgot that I needed to do logic for a whole string of sets, and so I had to go back and refactor some things. So it's not the cleanest thing. It probably could be shortened a little bit, so I'll go through that, and I'll give you a demonstration and show you how I've kind of got 2 things going at once. And when I say that, that's why when you hear me say that in the logic and the code is because I had to go back and create this because I forgot to do this. So there's that. And then 2, your calculator should not evaluate more than a single pair, so they're just talking about that. You should round your answers with long decimals so they don't overflow the screen, and we'll talk about that. Pressing equals before entering all the numbers or an operator could cause problems. Pressing clear should wipe out any existing data. And I got something to handle that. Sorry, my Tourette's is active. Display a snarky error message if the user tries to divide by 0. Don't let it crash your calculator. Extra credit. Basically work with floats, but don't let somebody enter in multiple floats in one number. So like they couldn't enter 12.3.56. You want to disable the decimal button so they can't press it any more times after that first time. So you can allow it here, but you wouldn't allow it here or here within that same number. And I'll show you that. Extra credit, make it look nice, basically. We've already been over that one in the last video. Add a backspace button. I did not do that extra credit. And then add keyboard support. I did start to add keyboard support, and I stopped because it was janky, it wasn't really working, and it was buggy, so I got rid of the code. So with that said, let's get started. So basically I'm going to go through flow control basically with this. I'm going to try to explain it as it flows through the logic of it. For the most part, I'll be bouncing around a little bit. That's, you know, mainly just to help the understanding of the content and the concept and how I did things. So getting started here at the top, we're declaring our global variables and initialize. So we have a whole bunch of variables being created. Num1 is 0, num2 is 0. We have a temp num array, and this is my solution for holding temporary values, and you'll see this in my code. So I have a temporary num array 1 for num1. That's an empty array, and I have a temp num2 array that's an empty array. I have a variable called saved first value that initializes with 0, and I have an operator that initializes as a blank string, and then I have a temp operator array that initializes with 0, or empty array. I'm going to skip through some of this. This is the basic sub-functions for the math ops. We've already covered this. The only thing I will say that I added is this block right here. So what we're doing here, actually no, pretty much this whole thing here. We had to add some rounding in, as we just went over in one of the requirements is to add in rounding. So there's no perfect rounding. I found out through a lot of internet research and a lot of Googling. There's a lot of discussion around rounding and what's considered good and what's considered okay and what's considered you're going overboard. So basically this I got off Stack Overflow is basically the most precise you can get without sending it to the back end basically. So what we're going to do is we're creating a variable, instantiating a variable called rounded, and it's taking on math.round, which we've used that many times. And then internally we have a add value, which is the addition here, the add value num1 plus num2, so that value gets put in there. And then number.epsilon, that basically just is the difference between 1 and the smallest value greater than 1 if it's representable as a number value. So basically it's a very, 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 very precise number. And you multiply that by 100 and divide it by 100 to round it. And we're going to then take that value and do rounded.toFix2. And toFix2 is taking out 2 decimal places. So we're only going to allow the calculator to print out 2 decimal places, so like 1.00 for example, so we can avoid overflow. And then we console.log our add, and then we instantiate our calculate display, and then we send the rounded variable to the text content of the calculator display, so it displays that out. The same goes for the same exact code as for subtract, multiply, and then we get down to divide, and this part hasn't changed. We have our error check for division by 0, because if you remember, that was one of the checks, is to give a snarky error message, which we went over in the last video, if you try to divide by 0. If we didn't, or I don't remember, yeah, we went over some previous videos, because yeah, that was before the CSS, so I probably won't show that again, but maybe I will at the end. I got a lot to cover tonight, so I'm talking kind of fast, so feel free to rewatch this for more understanding. So we have our error check here. If divided value equals infinity, gives them throwing errors, it cannot divide by 0, you should know better. Else, we're going to do the rounding block, basically. And the exact same as above. And then we have our switch statement. Use operator variable to determine which function to call. That remained unchanged. Honestly, it's about the only block of code that was not refactored through this last effort at all, really. Then we get down here to the nitty-gritty. I call it calculator advanced features and algo. So this starts a run calculator, so I'm going to bounce you down at the bottom here. because I put my calls at the bottom. So we're going to call and run the main function, run calculator. And then what that does is inside of that is a whole bunch of sub-functions. And then I tried with my flow control, I tried putting everything inside of a function if I could, if it made sense. You see these DOMs down here are not inside of, well, they're inside the display, they're inside the run calculator function, but they're not their own functions. So it didn't seem to make sense to put everything inside of its own function. So basically, run calculation, get operator selection, and get number clicked are all sub-functions of run calculator, and they're called at the bottom. And then right down here you have DOMs, DOM for clear button. We're instantiating a clear button that's pulling from clear, which is that one right there. That button there has the class clear. And we're going to call clear button. We're going to add event listener for a click to it, and if it's clicked, we're going to do location.reload, and that simply just reloads the page. It's like a refresh in the browser. I went over this a long time ago, one of my other exercise videos I did. I don't remember which one it was. I think it might have been rock paper scissors maybe. But anyway, moving on, we have a DOM for plus minus button. So we're creating a sign button from the query selector class sign, and then sign button we're going to add an event listener click, and then when it's clicked, we're going to do a couple things. We want to append the plus minus to a num array and display out. So if operator is empty, meaning operator has not been clicked yet, meaning that's your multiplication, division, addition, subtraction, we're going to call the calculator display up, and I left all the console.logs in here, so you guys at the end we'll go through some examples, and I'll have dev tools up so we can see the console.logs, so it's kind of more intuitive to see what's going on, because sometimes just looking at the code here, this can be a bit overwhelming, especially since you didn't write it, so it might be hard to follow. So I figured that would help with some additional understanding. So I didn't console out pretty much any of the, or I didn't comment out any of these really. So then we're going to, so just kind of ignore them for now. So in temp num array 1.splice, so what this is going to do, it's going to take, if I remember right, splice 0, this is going to be index 0, and 1 means we're going to edit one element, and then the end of it is what we're going to change. So we're going to take temp num1 array position or object 0 multiplied by -1, which means this whole statement basically just means we're going to take the very first object in the array and we're going to multiply it by -1, which means we're going to position over to the right 1, and we're going to, and then at toString at the back means we're going to convert it to that is going to be converted to a string, and we're going to splice that into the temp num array. And all that does, that's just a fancy way of basically toggling a negative in front of the number, and that's why I have the -1 in there, so we can get the negative in front of it and as a string. So you'll see it in action, and it's just toggling off a negative and not negative on that button. And then num1 will equal temp num array 1 num1 array, or excuse me, num1 will equal temp num1 array dot join, and so that strips out all the commas and everything with the double quotes. And num1 will then be displayed to the calculator display. Else, if operator is not empty, meaning we have clicked it, we're going to append plus minus to num array 2. So if you kind of get in the flow here a bit, so we have additional array for this second number. So we're going to again do the same thing. We're going to bring up calculator display, and then we're going to splice temporary num2 array. 0, 1 is the exact same thing, and then we're going to convert it to a string. So basically we're going to insert that that negative into the array, splicing it in, and then calling it out and joining it, making it, assigning it to num2 and displaying num2 to the display. And then we have a DOM for decimal button, and we're going to create decimal button, and it's going to be called from the decimal class. And decimal button gets a click add event listener, and we're going to then create a variable called decimal button, and that's going to be period, and this is the decimal it sounds like. So we're going to have periods for decimals, and then we're going to again we're going to call our calculator display out, because we're going to be using that here in the if statement. And we have if, again, same structure. If operator is empty string, meaning it's not, none of the 4 operator buttons have been checked or clicked, we are going to instantiate the display again. We're going to take temp num1 array and push decimal button to it. So basically we're just going to take simply just, oh, sorry about that. Wow, that was weird. I don't know why my VM does that. Come on. Now where was I at here? Jeez. Alright. Okay. So here's our decimal button. So we're going to push, which means just means we're gonna take the period decimal, and we're gonna put it into num1 at the end. So or excuse me, temp num1 array. So we're gonna push it to the end of the array, which is what we want to do because that's the current position that we want it in. So we're ingesting and creating the array as we go along. So there's no need to do any fancy stuff with it. We just need to push it in there, so it stays in. So it goes in the end there. And then num1 equals temp num1 array joins, just like before. We're going to join the array and create a string out of it, and it's going to be num1, and we're going to display out num1. And then we're going to do document.getElementById decimal, and .disabled equals true, and all this does is just disables the button after we've clicked it, so it can't be clicked again. And we're just going to say, hey, num1's disabled now. It's just part of the troubleshooting process, so I can see it, making sure that if happens. And then else, if operator has been clicked, we're going to basically do the same thing, but we're going to do it to num2. So I'm not going to go through that again, but we're just going to push decimal button to temp num2 array. It's the exact same thing, except the nomenclature is 2, because we're doing this on so there's 2 separate nums or 2 separate arrays, one for each, and the array is the temporary storage. That's how we remember our values, and then our nums are the end results that get calculated. And then we're going to disable the button so it can't be clicked, and I verified this all works. And then at the bottom here we have call run the advanced subfunctions. So then we call back numbers clicked, get operator selected, and run calculation. So again, I'm going to back you up a little bit. So if we go up to right here, we're going to call get number clicked is the first if you will, nested function that gets called inside run calculator. And it has we're going to create operand buttons off everything that's query selecting all operand classes, which are the numbers. Operand is just a fancy phrase for number. So operand buttons for each. There's a for loop for each button. We're going to have add an event listener for click. And on the click, we're going to say hit me for the first number. And we're going to have save first value equals button.getAttribute value. All this does is that takes that value that's from the button. So like whatever this is, 7, 8, 9, 4, 5, 6, whatever that one is. And then we're going to push it out to save first value. And then we're going to instantiate and call the calculator display again. And then we have our if statement. We're going to append to num1 if multiple numbers are pressed and displayed out. So again, if operator has not been pressed yet, meaning we're on our first number, we're going to have temp num1 array, push, and we're going to push in that save first value that we just instantiated up here. And that's going to become temp num1 array. And then we're just going to talk a little bit to the console, show me the array 1, and and then num1 is going to take on temp num1 array.join, and that's what we've seen before. So that's basically going to take the array and strip it down and convert it to a number, and that's going to be fed into num1, and then we're going to display that to the calculator display. Else, if operator has been clicked, we're going to again do the same thing. We're going to push the save first value to temp2 array instead of 1. A lot of redundancy here, and then num2 will become temp num2 array.join. So we're going to convert the array to a number. So we're going to take away all the commas in the array, and you'll see this in action here. And then we display num2 to the calculator display. And then on to the next function is get operator selection, and we're going to query select all operators. So this would be your division, multiplication, addition, subtraction. Those are our operators. And then for each of those buttons, we're going to add an event click listener, add event listener, and it's a click, and we're going to operate. That operator command or operator variable, is going to be same as before. So we're going to have a value attribute is going to become the operator. So that would be the value of division, and that's going to become operator, which is a string. And then we're going to push the operator into the temp operator array. So we have a third, if you remember from above, way up at the declarations, we have a temp operator array that is going to be used to track our operator clicks. It may not make sense right now, but the reason we have to do that is because we're kind of in a loop right here because we're doing a operator button, so we need to keep track of the previous click, because the next time this runs, if you think about it for a second, it's going to evaluate the previous clicked operator. So if that makes sense, it won't evaluate the current one, it will evaluate the previous one. So I had to actually think about that for a minute and I created a third array to track that. So then we have so we get that push there, and then we just console log store temp operator so I can read it. And then I have enable the decimal button if disabled from previous click use. So remember earlier we disabled the decimal button, so here we are just enabling with document dot get an element by ID disable equal false. So that basically will re-enable it for use, and we can do that here safely, because by the time we get to this function call and these buttons here, we are already past that first button. We're satisfied. We're not entering any more digits into that array. And then also next thing, we're checking to see if multi-operand strings exist and need calculated on the fly. So this one took me a bit. This is the beastie part. So this is what I was talking about earlier, where I kind of have two things going at once. So everything I just went over is happening, but then this is also happening. So this happens if we have a multi-operand string, which is a fancy way of saying if we have a situation like this, where we have the user entering in multiple strings of operations without an equals, we want it to evaluate the first set and then store the answer. Evaluate the second set, store the answer, etc., and still get to the value. And so that's what this chunk of code here is doing. Because the others, everything I just went over thus far, it's actually not doing that. It's only evaluating num1 and num2 and spitting out the result. It's only doing num1 and num2. So it'll be clear when I bring it up on in the example, or on the in the browser at the end. So basically we have an if statement here. So if temp num array 1 does not equal empty, and temp num2 array does not equal empty, basically meaning if there's something in both of them, because we're using the and statement, we are going to instantiate the calculator display. Num1 is going to equal or take on temp num1 array.join. So we're going to join both the arrays and put them into numbers, into num1, num2. And then in case they aren't numbers, because I had a problem with this earlier where I had to use parse float because num1, num2 were, I think, strings. And so this forces the parse float forces it into an integer, and not just any integer, but a floating integer with decimal places, which is important for our next step. And then that will will take the value of num1, num2, and then we have a temporary variable instantiated inside of this if called temp operator, and that's taking on temp operator array, and then this temp operator array dot length minus two strings. So this is kind of doing what the other example was, just a little bit different. So basically what this is doing is this is taking the temp operator array length minus 2, meaning we're going to get the whole length of the array and minus 2. So that means we're going to go to the far right end, last array item, and then 1 over to the left. And then we're going to convert that to string. And that's our temp operator. And that's important to know that, and that's actually a very important piece of code that it took me a while to figure out, because we need to evaluate the temp operator as the second to last, just like I was explaining a minute ago, because we have to have a variable that remembers what that operator is so that we can calculate against it. Otherwise, the calculations, the stringed, multi-stringed, won't work. Hope that makes sense. So then we're going to call operate from within here, the operate function from above, and it's going to take on temp operator num1 and num2. And so the only difference here is that from the other method is that this one's taking temp operator instead of operators. So that's why I went over this with you. So it's going to evaluate temp operator and instead of just regular operator. And we need to do that because we have to evaluate the previous operand, and I'll show you that in action if that doesn't make a lot of sense. And so here we're going to create another variable, let temp string value inside of calc display.text content. So basically we're taking the content, the current content of calc display, and we're creating a variable out of it called temp string value. And that's important because we have to also keep track of the evaluation of the answer basically to this, and that's what this is doing. Is I just got a clever way of basically creating this as a string for now and storing it in here. So basically operate comes back, and then text content is what, so basically the operate runs, it displays on the calculator what the answer is, and then we're piping it out to temp string value. And so that's important. Like I said, we're going to need to know that value because we're going to store it before we move on. And then after that, we are going to empty out the array because we don't need it anymore. So temp num1 array and temp num2 array is going to become empty arrays. Num1, num2 are going to be emptied out to 0. And then I'm just console logging some stuff. And then temp num1 array dot push. So we're going to take temp string value that was we created up here because it still exists. We're still in, linearly inside this if. So we're going to push it into temp num1 array, which is now currently empty because of this, which is by design. So now at this point, temp num1 array will contain the answer to the previous operate, and then we are creating a string again here by using the join command or join method. So num1 will now contain the answer in number format, not string. And there's a console.log. And then the last part is run calculation. This is just a simple little one. So we're going to instantiate or create equals button, which is going to be query selector equals. So this is our equals button. We're going to have a click on it, and we're going to have a calculate display equals document.query selector display. So we're going to instantiate the calc display again. Num1 is same as before, is parse float num1. So we're parsing it out and creating a floating integer and just reassigning that right out to num1, num2 again, and then we're calling the operator or operate function above with operator num1, num2. Wow, that's a lot, and this is 29 minutes. So I hope you guys are still with me. The best is at the end here. So I know this I went really fast, so you might have to watch this again. there's a lot going on here. Like I said, I've spent a lot of time on this. This was very, very complex. So with all that said, let's just, sometimes it's best just to see it in action. Okay, so here it is, and I've got the console up so we can see all those logs and see what's going on. So if we do like 1 plus 1, so what it's doing here, it says hit me for the first number. So we gave it a 1, and we're applying it to the array. So there's the array, array 1 and 1. Saved first value is 1, and then hit the operator. So we're hitting the operator there, and then we're storing, and then when we hit the plus, then it also stored the temp operator in the array for string calc. So that's where we're tracking our series. So we got the plus in there, and this is going to be important in a second. You'll see why I did that. So decimal button should now be enabled. So we didn't use it, but it's enabled when you do that. Again, just being verbose so I could remember what's going on, because like I said earlier, there's about 10 billion different things going on all at the same time here. So hit me for the first button again. So this is just kind of repetitive code because it's looping through that num1, num2 section at the top. So just disregard this part. And then I hit 1 again, and then 1 is put into array 2 for num2. And so we have that plus that. So when I hit this plus the second time, it's going to evaluate this plus. Actually, I'm going to use minus. Okay, so let's go through this. So this chain just did a whole bunch of stuff. So I hit the operator minus, so adds a minus in there, right? So store operator in array for calc. So it appends or pushes in that negative operator, just like we told to in code. Decimal button should be enabled now, running string calculations now, passing through the switch. So there's a plus. See it's plus because we told it in code that we want to evaluate the -2, which is 1 plus 1, -2 shift is the second prior array, and that's array item, and that's plus, which is what we want because we hit the plus. Because if you don't, it won't calculate right, because if you noticed I hit minus. So if I didn't have that code in there, it would just evaluate minus, and it would always just do the current, and it would skip the very first calculation, and the numbers would always be wrong. So then temp string value is 2, which is up here, but that gets stored in that temp string value that we declared. And now we're clearing out the arrays and the numbers. So array 1 is empty, array 2 is empty, num1, num2 is empty, and we push the string to the array 1. So that value got pushed to array 1. And if we type in a 1 here, now you see it doing it again. So we had num1 array, num2 array is receiving a 1. So now we have 2 and 1. And if we hit equals, and then see now it ends on the subtraction, because I had the subtraction there, so it went back up to here, and it ran that last one. So we had the subtraction, and that's why I did the subtraction. So and it says time to run the math, and then it's just bringing in the value of array 1, which is 2. It's just 0.00 because we had it as a float in code. So and then this is 1 from the array 2, and passes through the switch minus, and subtract equals 1. And that's basically it. I don't want to make this video any longer than it needs to be, but I will just kind of go over the clear button there. That clears everything out. That's that location.reload, and here is the operation for a negative number. So you see when I clicked it, it said negative button registered here, append the array with a negative number, and that's where we had the code. There's your negative. That's where we had the code for position minus times 1 length. I think it was length times -1, which means it's going to take that as a string and put it in front of the 5. And then you can press it again and it'll remove it. See? Now we're back to a +5. Clear that out. And you do here's the error check. 1 divided by 0 equals error cannot divide by 0. You should know better. I think we've seen that last time. A couple videos ago I showed you. And here is the decimal. Let's refresh that. clear it. Here is the decimal in action. So if I press that button, it says decimal pressed, decimal button registered here. Append the array with the decimal, so it's appending the decimal at the very end, just like we told it in code, and num1 decimal button should now be disabled. And I'm clicking it right now, and you can see the button lighting up, and it's not doing anything because it's disabled. And it will remain disabled until I press an operand, so or operator. So even though I'm pushing these other operands, it's going to remain disabled until I do this. And then now it's enabled, and it says right there, decimal button should be enabled now. And we temporarily stored the plus inside of the array, the operand array. And if I do 5 again, I'll be able to, there's num2 array, is put 5 in there, and if I press the button, decimal button, it will append the 5 to the second array, or the first array, excuse me. And it says num2 decimals should be disabled now, and that's correct. I cannot press it anymore. And that's it. And that equals, and it adds to 10.00 because I had 5.0 plus 5. Well, I didn't put anything in there, but it is 0, so it adds the floats. And I don't think I forgot anything. So this is by far my longest video ever. I knew it was going to be long. Hope you guys are stuck with me to the end here, because this really helps cement it and clarify it. And then just to show you real quick here, you can just do single operators, and that works too. 3 plus 3 is 6. Passes through, just like I think I showed you that functionality a couple videos ago. So what the real meat and potatoes is the multiple numbers. You see we're putting in an array, so as I'm clicking more numbers, it's just increasing the array, and that's how I'm cleverly remembering the value put in there. So again, this was the coolest part, so I hope you guys stuck to the end for that additional understanding. Please rewatch it if you didn't understand it and you need a second look. Thank you guys for coming along ride with me today. I hope that this was not overwhelming and that you learned something. I know I learned a lot during this project, and that's it. So I'm at 93% complete, and I've git committed, I've uploaded to GitHub, and I've uploaded my project on here, so you guys can do the same. Don't forget to do all that stuff when you're done. And next time, I think I'm going to take a day or two off just to give myself a break. Calculator was a big beast, and I just need a little bit of a break. But in the next couple days or so, we'll get back at it and go to the back end and just do these couple last ones, and we will be concluding foundations. So exciting times. So again, thank you guys for coming along on the journey with me. Please like, share, and subscribe for more content. And let me know in the comments what you guys thought and how you're coming along with Calculator, and what your level understanding is with the advanced part of it. So with all that said, until next time, see ya.